what happened to America. The nation that fought a revolutionary war to establish the first democracy in the modern world in 1776, defeating a super then mighty colonial power, Britain, to establish democracy, a democratic state. And since then, the nation has charted a trailblazing path for over 200 years until this 21st century began, until 9/11. The nation has undertaken many struggles, difficult struggles. The Civil War in the middle of 19th century to abolish slavery, then about 4 or 5 decades long struggle, collective bargaining movement to establish workers' rights and welfare, and then the women's liberation movement that to establish gender parity, and then the civil rights movement, among other movements. But the civil rights movement is a iconic movement to establish equal rights of all citizens, irrespective of race, color, and religion. And these are the struggles that not only change America, but also change the rest of the world. So America is a catalyst of change, a powerful catalyst of change. But sadly today, American people are timid and seems like silent or half asleep in a slumber when their government is perpetrating international crimes. This is a sad time. The United States of America, that was looked up to as the champion of freedom and democracy toward most of the part of the 20th century, is now looked at a rogue state that once declared that all nation states should have equal rights as to their sovereignty, their territorial integrity, their security, and their prosperity and trade. That is the state today is violating the international rule of law, the world order that this nation was the founder and the architect of. The American government, under visionary leaders like Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt, who laid down foreign policies for America for the first time. Before that, America was an isolationist country and was not involved in a world that was dominated by colonial rule. But it was Woodrow Wilson who, after the First World War, laid down a visionary foreign policy for the United States. That America, being the most powerful and most influential country in the world at that time, that emerged as a most influential country at that time, and the largest economy in the world, has moral responsibility. And that responsibility is that America should always stand in solidarity with the struggling people of the world, the suffering people of the world, in their struggle for freedom and a better life. So if the world is freer, if the world is a better place, that will serve America's interests. They were dedicated Americans and they were dedicated humanitarian leaders and the leaders of the world. Under the Woodrow Wilson during the First World War, and Roosevelt after 1933, and 1945, when he died, They laid down visionary policies at home, visionary policies in the world. So, what happened to that state? Why Washington could not stay on the path of Roosevelt and his mentor, Wilson? Many scholars and experts think that if the United States would have stayed on that path, then America could have achieved most of its global objectives at the fraction of the enormous price the taxpayers paid, America paid, not only in money but also in blood and lives, and caused enormous pain in the world. And those counterproductive and costly policies got nothing for the United States, except that America has lost its leadership in the world. But if Washington would have stayed on the path that Roosevelt and his mentor Wilson laid down for America, then today it would the world would have been an infinitely better place, and America would be an infinitely better country and a natural leader of humanity, as it was at that time. The 14 points that Woodrow Wilson declared in 1918, just before ending the First World War, was hailed worldwide and supported by the American people. So we need to think about those times. And then his follower, Franklin Roosevelt, also had the Atlantic Charter. That was the precondition for actually ending colonial era and starting a rule-based world order, new world order that will avoid wars and that will sustain peace. And their agenda finally was materialized in the United Nations Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, also the product of the American leadership. And so this is a phenomenal achievement by a nation. But today the United States has become a rogue state. The United States is now looked down upon as an evil imperial power, and that violating other countries' sovereign rights. The Washington is complicit in a genocide and waging a war of aggression, which is international crime according to the UN Charter. And 100 specialists, experts, and scholars have declared that this war, the war against Iran, is a war of aggression, war of choice, war unprovoked war. Iran was never a threat to the United States. Yet, the Trump administration decided to bomb Iran twice in June 2025 and this year. The war has started. The war was initiated by absolutely reckless, shameless, irresponsible actions of the Trump administration in perpetrating this war against Iran, war of aggression. And American people are not coming to the streets as much as they did in the late 1960s and early 1970s that changed Washington and that changed history. American people are powerful catalysts of change if they are aware, if they are united and determined to change. It's long overdue that American people rise up to the plate and take up their responsibility to change their government, because their government is not only doing tremendous disservice to them, but they are doing tremendous disservice to humanity, to the other people, the other innocent, countless countless people are suffering, and thousands of people have been killed, and 70,000 Palestinians have been massacred, have been killed in the genocide. And Washington was a partner in that genocide. American people did not reacted enough, did not do enough. This is something that American people must think about it. They need to reclaim their country. They need to reclaim their values, the core national values they regained. They gained through many struggles of their forefathers and these during last 2 centuries. So this is I am talking to the American people today that the younger generation should come to Washington and take up the torch as a new generation torch that Kennedy urged and wanted to change. But he was killed. He was mercilessly killed. I will talk about it in another episode of his agenda and why he was killed, what kind of things he was thinking of, and the policies that he was planning to take to establish peace in the world. He was killed. And today, again, the time has come for the new generation to take up the torch and come to Washington and become representatives of people and change Washington and change the policies at home and abroad to establish peace in the world. Let us talk about the predatory forces that have reduced that America that used to be to a rogue state, to an evil empire, to countless people in the world. Worldwide, America is now rejected as the leader. America is now looked down upon as a perpetrator of crimes and destroyer of the world order that avoided many wars since the Second World War ended and since the New World Order was established in 1945. And since then, the world order and the international norm that it produced that has avoided many wars and protected smaller and weaker states because the rule of law, the international rule of law, or the New World Order was based on the idea that all nation states have equal rights as to their sovereignty, as to their territorial integrity, their security, and the pursuit of prosperity and trade. These are the fundamental principles of the international rule of law that was laid down in the UN Charter in 1945, and United States of America was the founder and the architect of that new world order. Again, the irony is that today it is the United States of America that is destroying the world order, the international rule of law, and vandalizing the world, using the might is right policy, its military might. Washington is partnering in genocide, in capturing the head of state of a sovereign country that is not a threat to the United States, and it is conducting a war of aggression against Iran, which is never a threat to the United States. So these kind of policies have, and then Trump administration has threatened its allies and its foes alike of invading and occupying their countries and their territories, as if the Trump administration, the US government has become a tyrant in the world. It can do anything it like. So this the world order is in disarray. So now the question is, so who are the forces behind this? Because American people were never behind this. American people, if they were aware what their government policies are abroad and even at home, that American people would come to the street. Most of the time, they are not aware. And I will talk about it, why they are misinformed and misled, and how. So, at the height of the Cold War in 1956, a prominent scholar, American scholar, Columbia professor, wrote a book, masterpiece book, called The Power Elite, the bestseller of all time. And first time he exposed that there are three powerful predatory forces in America who have interwoven interest. The top people of military, the top people of business or Wall Street, and the corrupt politicians. They all have interwoven interest, and they collude and consolidate their power to influence the government to become their servant and not the servant of the people. And so the government makes rules and laws so that gives enormous privileges to these predatory forces, these power elite, and then the people become actually victim. That is, in essence, that book says that the American people, unless they are aware, they are united and determined, it's very difficult to challenge these predatory forces that are working behind the scene all the time. They are enormously wealthy, they are influential, and they are relentless. They are constantly working to sabotage American democracy and the interest of the American people and the national interest abroad. But fathom the C. Wright Mills, his name is C. Wright Mills, the Columbia professor who wrote this book. First time, and it was an eye opener for countless Americans at that time. But Mills could not fathom at that time that after the 1967 Middle East war, there would be another predatory force, far more powerful and influential, that will establish stranglehold on the US government. Why the 1967 Middle East war became a catalyst of this sea change, this seismic outcome, seismic thing that took place in American government, because the Johnson administration provided massive military aid to Israel after he came to power after Kennedy was assassinated. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. And up to then, the Kennedy administration, and before his time, the Eisenhower administration refused to give massive military aid to Israel because their policy was that Israel has to learn how to live peacefully, coexist with its neighbors, and they did not want Israel to be a superpower in the region and a hegemony in the region, dominating and the dictating force. So they did not allow the massive military aid that Israel had been asking the Eisenhower administration and then Kennedy administration. But after Kennedy was assassinated in 63, Johnson administration complied with Israel's constant nagging for the massive military aid. He provided that. Using that military aid from America, Israel defeated all its Arab neighbors in 1967 Middle East war. And that was the sea change. There were countless Jews. In fact, in 1993, there are Jewish organizations who declared that most of the Jews do not really support Israel and do not think Israel represents them. They're Jewish organizations. And so most of the, or majority of the Jewish people in the West did not support Israel. And some were actually vehemently opposed to the creation of Israel. There were huge protest marches when Israel was created in the West, particularly in the United States, in America, in Philadelphia, other places. But 1967 Middle East war proved that Israel can survive and Israel can become a very powerful state in the Middle East. That idea attracted many Jews, Western Jews, and they became Zionist force overnight. They supported Israel and devoted their wealth and time and effort to establish a very powerful lobby and pro-Israeli activist force in the West, particularly in America. And that became a powerful force and establishing a predatory force that would establish a stranglehold on the US government. That's the first time, and hopefully last time, that they became the absolute captured American government by the neck. That's a long story. I will not go into details about that, how they do it, but there are glimpses of things that I will tell you, the glimpses, the ideas that you will get from my talk today that will give you some idea how these predatory forces work. So now we have the top people of military industrial complex, the top people of Wall Street, the pro-Israeli groups, and the corrupt politicians. They all collude for mutual interest. The elites, the predatory elites, the predatory force became enormously more powerful. So they planned that how to sabotage American democracy and how to capture, how to use American government to pursue their vested interest. So there are 2-3 agendas they took. The first was that they have to capture the media, American media. So after long their efforts, the 1996 Telecommunication Act came into existence. What is that act? That act removed all the healthy rules and regulations that were there to protect the media, that is the vital pillar of democracy, to protect media's integrity and media's vitality in providing service to the society. Those rules and regulations, this act removed. In place, brought those rules and regulations that handed over the ownership of the media into the hands of few elites, mostly pro-Israeli elites, oligarchs, and the billionaires that capture. Because after the 1996 Telecommunication Act, there was a gold rush of merging and of buying out the 150 organizations, media organizations were there before this act. 150 plus some organizations, media organizations and outlets that used to compete with each other to bring news and analysis and all this to inform people. Those 150 organizations were gradually swallowed by these few elites into six mega corporations, all owned by the elites, the pro-Israeli elites, and pro-military industrial complex elites. America has lost its vital organ, and it has become the media. The mainstream media has become the mouthpiece of these predatory elites, the military industrial complex, pro-Israeli groups, the lobby, and of course the business, the big businesses, multinationals. So media is gone. What is next? The next is campaign finance laws. Now, campaign finance laws previously, the laws were not changed, but the laws were contested, and the Supreme Court had to decide and reinterpret the existing law of campaign finance. Before that, there were healthy rules and regulations, but there are powerful law firms were used, and the laws experts and scholars, so-called the intellectuals, the law experts, were deployed. Enormous money was spent to convince Supreme Court that restricting corporate contribution means a violation of the freedom of speech, Fourth Amendment right of the people. So Supreme Court yielded. I don't know why, but I think that Supreme Court was thinking that the rights, individual rights, is more important than democracy, because gateway to sabotage democracy is campaign financing. When an electoral process, a election campaign, is hostage to big money, when politicians that will be coming to Washington, elected as representatives of people, are actually puppets of big money, then democracy is down the drain. That's what has happened. If you are wondering what happened to Congress, what happened to Senate, these are the places, the sacrosanct places that were looking after for American interest, the values and principles, and that were promoting democracy and values in the world, and they were on the side of justice. That is what the first part of 20th century, and even later, the Supreme Court again and again gave interpretations and supported, and in their judicial review, those laws and those things that changed America for better in the first for making Civil Rights Act and all these things that has made America great. Supreme Court was a great contributor. What happened to that Supreme Court? That's people should wonder that how Supreme Court failed to see that if the electoral process is a hostage to big money, then American democracy cannot be a functioning. It will be a dysfunctional democracy, or it will soon become oligarchy or authoritarian government, as it has become. No wonder that how it has become, how America has traveled from there to here, how America has come down from here to here. This is a landslide. That's a land. It's a absolutely a disgraceful, degrading state America is in now. And this is because of the media has become the mouthpiece of elites, and electoral process have become as hostage to big money. So what is left? What is left is now divide and rule, divide the nation, because the core national values that America has gained through various struggles in 200 plus years, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the collective bargaining movement, and many other movements to establish parity, justice, and harmony and stability. Those core national values, democratic values, are also universal values, and they stand firmly against vested interest. They stand, they become a roadblock sometimes to the predatory forces to take over. So those values needs to be dissolved or divided. The nation needs to be divided to rule, divide and rule. That's the old formula for elites, predatory elites. No wonder. So what happened? In the meantime, 1996, Benjamin Netanyahu became the prime minister of Israel, and his extremist party, Likud party, the Israeli public brought them to power, and they cancelled Oslo Accord, the accord in which two states would exist side by side. It was not fair, it was not just, but at least peace could have been achieved slowly. 1996, he came to power, and he brought a new agenda and force into American politics to this divide and rule, pushing Christian Zionism in the mindset of America, Christian Zionism and white supremacist ideology, racist ideology, Islamophobia. Millions of dollars have been spent to spread Islamophobia in America. It's still going on. But since Netanyahu came into power, that got 9 lives, an enormous force. So Islamophobia, xenophobia, racism, and America started training. Israel, American police force, and some military forces also went to Israel for training. I don't understand why, but what Israel has indoctrinated in them, we saw the repercussions later on in Minneapolis and other places against the black people and against the Muslims and against the colored people and the immigrants and all that, the ICE and all that. These are the brainchild, and these are the product of indoctrinations and training, intensive trainings that took place in Israel, and then the pro-Israeli groups in the United States, the experts and the intellectuals. Another thing I would like to say is that it's called Hasbara. It's a public relations group or project that was undertaken to concoct false narratives and lies and glorify Israel and convince American people that Israel is an indispensable, unconditional friend, doing enormous things in the Middle East for the America. Hasbara is created with that the crimes and injustices, the apartheid policy, that oppression, injustices, unthinkable injustices that Israeli government has been perpetrating against the Palestinian people for last at least 5-6 decades, apartheid policies. But even before that, since 1948 when Israel came into existence, and before that, when Haganah was created, before Israel was created, Zionist militia groups, terrorist militia groups like Haganah, Stern Gang, Irgun, Lehi, those kinds of organizations were created to terrorize Arab populations and drive them away from Palestine. So, for over 100 years, Arabs have been facing inhuman repression, and that was whitewashed in the Western media. This is how it was done. The media ownership was controlled by the pro-Israeli elites, and then Hasbara and other PR work were the best and the brightest in the PR field were hired to actually promote Hasbara. So this is one by one. I cannot give the whole details of everything. I may know some, and maybe you can even explore further. But I'm trying to share with you as much as I can in this little time, and only picking and choosing so that you can have an idea. So American people are indoctrinated and brainwashed, at least half of them. The nation is divided and polarized, each against the other, the perfect condition for the elites to rule. So now the pro-Israeli groups and lobby, they are electing the people that will comply with their wishes. This is the situation we are in today. There are other things that American people are deliberately misinformed, lied to, bluffed, and misled, and kept silent. The medias are bombarded with sports and entertainment to distract most of the Americans so that they do not think about what is going on in their country, how their government is being hijacked, how their democracy has been hijacked, how their foreign policies have been hijacked so that they lost their leadership in the world, their moral voice in the world. American people never would support, or never supported this kind of agenda at home or abroad, because their psyche is made. They are the struggles, different struggles to bring equality and justice has created the mindset of American people. And I have been there, I have lived for a long time. I know, I have witnessed it. And I know that America is a self-correcting nation. If the past is the reference, America has been a self-correcting nation. And indeed, a vibrant democracy most of its history. And it can reclaim its glory and its greatness again if they are united and if they try again. Vicious forces are at play. The transnational alliances of elites, because technology has made this world small. In this intensely interconnected and interdependent global society, the elites of one country, the predatory forces of one country are colluding that with other to victimize people of both sides. It's the elites who gains from wars. It's the elites who gains from confrontations and conflicts. Windfall profit they get. But who suffers? Suffers the people. American taxpayers paid $8 trillion in the 2-decade-long war on terror project that was most counterproductive and brought disgraceful failure in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places. And radicalism has not gone. In fact, war on terror actually increased radicalism in the world. This was warned by many scholars that there is no military solution to radicalism and extremism. It's establishing democracy. establishing good system, establishing good relationships that would marginalize, that will eradicate radicalism, and moderation will emerge. And that is always the case. History is a testament to that. Through constructive engagements, through democratization and stabilization, the moderate forces come on the forefront, and the societies become moderate societies. But when they are victims of injustices, when they are victims of repression and wars and sanctions, undue, unjust sanctions, America's irresponsible and thoughtless sanctions against many countries have radicalized those countries. America and Western policies actually are at the core, are responsible for radicalizing many places in the world, especially the Middle East. So this is time that American people rise up to the level and take up the charge, take charge and change their society. If America establishes functioning democracy and America is a democratic country and reclaim its greatness, its values, its foreign policies that Woodrow Wilson and Roosevelt and Kennedy pursued, then the world would be a better place and America would be infinitely better place. It's a win-win situation. And that is what I am leaving you with this thought that this is time to fight. This is time to come to the street peacefully, but united, determined, and find out who have done this tremendous disservice to your society, to this world, to humanity. You are a powerful catalyst of change. The changes that you have brought in history have changed the world later. That is the key, the core idea. That is the truth. So a win-win world, for a win-win and for a better and for peace and harmony, I am leaving these thoughts to you.